When Lesley Ford disappeared with her 4 grown children, her brother, Peter Wyatt, feared the worst. He had a premonition that Lesley and the children had been killed. Lesley endured years of abuse during her marriage to Lee Ford, who manipulated and controlled her, dictating her behavior, relationships, and even the way she dressed. Lee also abused his own children, and classmates often noticed and commented on the bruises the children brought to school. Peter suspects Lee also sexually abused the children. Lesley eventually decided to leave her abusive marriage, planning to leave with all her children. However, this decision cost her dearly. On a cool early fall day in 2000, Peter received a phone call with news about his sister. One of his uncles called him around 2 a.m., asking if Lesley was with him. When Peter refused, he immediately reported her missing to the police, telling them he believed Lee had killed her. Too late, their 2 young children, and Lesley's 4 children from her first marriage, Sarah Jane, Anne Marie, Stephen, and Craig, lived in a bungalow in the village of Carnkey, West Cornwall. The last time Lesley and her 4 older children were seen alive was on August 31st, 2000. In the days and weeks after their disappearance, Lee began to create the illusion that Lesley had left him. He cast himself as a victim, claiming that Lesley had abandoned him and their 2 young children, and that her 4 children had walked away from a previous relationship. He even called the children's school to inform them they were sick, collected their books and returned them, and declared that the children would not return. Lee also took the children's clothes and belongings to Lesley's mother's house, where she stored them in the attic without realizing their importance. These items, including Lesley's blood-stained blanket, where Lee had beaten her before killing her, became key evidence. Despite his cruel actions, Lee continued to shamelessly communicate with people, even trying to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend. He killed Lesley and her 4 children, then calmly moved on, flirting with another woman. Peter never believed that Lesley had run away from the relationship. He believed she would come to his door if she left Lee, and he knew she would never abandon any of her children. Family means everything to Lesley. She and Peter have always been close, often talking on the phone. They supported each other through difficult childhoods, which fostered a strong bond between them. Around 1982, Lesley met the first love of her life, Michael Tranter. This relationship marked the beginning of her motherhood journey and its ultimate tragic end at the hands of her abusive husband. Lesley Wyatt met Michael Tranter on a bus in Thetford when she was 18 and he was 20. Their conversations during the bus journeys led to a relationship, and they eventually married. From 1983 to 1987, they had 4 children together: Sarah Jane, Anne Marie, Stephen, and Craig. Lesley is delighted to be a mother and loves her children immensely. Lesley's older brother Peter was very caring, often driving Lesley to the hospital when she went into labor. Lesley was a devoted mother, and her happiness was evident with each of her children. Lesley and her brother Peter remained close as her children grew up. Peter regularly visits Lesley, and her daughters love having their long hair brushed by him. Despite Lesley's strong relationships with her children and brother, her marriage to Michael ended in divorce in 1989. About a year after their divorce, Lesley entered into a troubled relationship with Lee Ford. Lee Ford enters her life, presenting himself as a protector by confronting and removing the problem man from her home. Lee seems to offer stability, support, and love, which is very appealing to Lesley in her vulnerable state. However, early signs of Lee's controlling nature soon emerged. Initially, Lee seemed polite and helpful, but as their relationship progressed, he became increasingly possessive. He begins dictating what Lesley can wear and who she can meet. He often forces her to change clothes if she doesn't accept her outfit and limits her contact with others. Lee's behavior becomes increasingly compulsive and isolating, making it difficult for Lesley to escape his control. Peter Wyatt initially saw no reason to worry about Lee when they first met. Lee appears intelligent and capable, despite being unsuited for his job. Lesley and Lee's relationship quickly led to marriage in 1990. However, soon after the marriage, Lee's true nature became apparent when he became physically violent towards Lesley. She confided in Peter that Lee would beat her and suspected he was also abusing substances. Despite the abuse, Lesley repeatedly tried to leave Lee, finding refuge in shelters for women and family members. Peter and his family often intervened, changing the locks and kicking Lee out of the house, but Lesley eventually let him in. This cycle of abuse and reconciliation frustrates and hurts Peter, who feels helpless as he watches his sister suffer. Lesley's anxiety is evident in her behavior, such as fidgeting with her fingers, a habit she has had since childhood when she was nervous or scared. Photographs from this period often show Lesley with a tense expression, while Lee lurks ominously in the background, demonstrating the control he exerted over her. Lee's ability to present a charming appearance makes it difficult for outsiders to see his true nature. He appeared to be a wonderful father and partner, hiding his increasingly controlling and abusive behavior behind closed doors. Lesley's attempts to escape the abusive relationship met with limited success as Lee's manipulative and controlling tactics kept her trapped. Peter and his family continued to support Lesley, trying to protect her from Lee's violence. Despite their efforts, the cycle of abuse continues, highlighting the complex and often hidden nature of domestic violence. Lesley Wyatt's situation is marked by complex emotions and psychological trauma stemming from her abusive relationship with Lesley Ford. Even though she loved Lee and had a child with him, it was hard for her to leave. Lesley's brother Peter can only offer her support, knowing that trying too hard could make her situation worse and lead to greater isolation. In 1992, Lesley and Lee had their first child together, further tying her to her abusive husband, who was now responsible for raising 5 children. While Lee appears to be a caring father, the children are unusually quiet, showing that they are afraid of him. Lee has a talent for manipulation, making those around him see him as charming and controlling. Peter often wondered if he had missed the signs that something was wrong, but the children's behavior could have been a result of the fear they experienced under Lee's domination. In 1995, after 5 years of marriage, Lesley tried to get out. She moved with her 5 children to Cornwall, staying at a caravan park without informing Lee of her whereabouts. Initially, she keeps her new location a secret, but Lee is determined to find her. He cleverly disguised himself as a lawyer and contacted Lesley's mother to ask for her new address. Through manipulation and deception, he tracked Lesley down and convinced her to take him back, claiming he had changed. After resuming their relationship, Lesley became pregnant again, bringing the total number of children in the family to 6. The family then moved to a remote wooden house in a village in Carnkey, a choice seemingly designed to ensure privacy and avoid surveillance. Local journalist Colin Gregory notes that the area has few services, making it a suitable hideaway for families. Lee may want to ensure that Lesley's ex-husband Michael and the rest of the Traynor family do not know about their whereabouts. At the time, police forces lacked the connected systems they have today, making it difficult for them to track family history. Investigating Lesley and Lee's circumstances required direct communication between different police departments, further complicating the search for information about the families. At first glance, the Ford family appears to have settled into their new community in Cornwall without any problems. Lee and Lesley Ford seem like a normal couple. Lesley was described by people in the area as a friendly and pleasant woman. Neighbors noted that she was approachable and well-liked, often interacting with others, although she did not venture out much. In contrast, Lee's demeanor was more reserved. He tends to keep to himself and is known to drink a lot of alcohol. He often isolated himself, spending hours in the garage watching television instead of participating in family activities. While he held part-time jobs doing odd jobs and working a casual job at a local dog farm, his work seemed sporadic. Many people who knew him commented that he was not particularly involved in the daily life of his family. On the surface, the Ford family leads a simple life, seemingly typical for a family living in Cornwall. Lesley's children from her first marriage, Sarah Jane Marie Craig and Stephen, are often seen playing outside and seem happy and sociable according to their friends and teachers. The photos of the children reveal bright smiles, painting a picture of a family filled with contentment. However, those who observed them closely noted subtle signs of distress, especially in the two older daughters. For example, Marie appeared reluctant to participate in physical activities at school, often hiding the bruises on her arms and legs. This behavior causes concern for teachers who feel something is wrong. The children often expressed a sense of urgency to return home, especially when Lee picked them up from school. They were acutely aware of the tension surrounding Lee, and this awareness led to feelings of fear and apprehension. It was clear that Lee had a controlling influence on Lesley and the children. He maintained power through intimidation, using physical and mental abuse as tools to instill fear. Lesley's friends later reflected on how she had confided in them about Lee's violent behavior, but she still managed to escape his grasp. The family dynamic is marked by fear and a desperate need for a normal life, which is overshadowed by Lee's abusive tendencies. Sarah Jane, the eldest daughter, finds refuge from her troubled family life by forming a close friendship with a co-worker at McDonald's, where they both work. This friendship gradually develops into a romantic relationship, providing Sarah with a much-needed escape from the oppressive atmosphere created by Lee. Her colleagues noticed that she often seemed depressed and anxious when her shift ended, as if she was afraid to return home to face the storm that awaited her. As time passed, Lesley's suspicions about Lee's inappropriate relationship with Sarah Jane and possibly Marie increased. She became increasingly worried about their safety and well-being. In a desperate attempt to protect her daughters, Lesley turned to a women's shelter, seeking help to escape an abusive environment. They assisted her in finding a place to live for herself and her children, but when it came time to leave Lee, she hesitated and ultimately decided to stay. This decision was influenced by the complex emotions surrounding her relationship with Lee, as well as the fear of the unknown that leaving represented. Behind the scenes, Lesley took further action to seek help. She and Sarah Jane went to see a lawyer, expressing concerns about violence in their home and the possibility of Lee perpetrating sexual abuse. Lawyers contacted social services, but tragically, no action was taken. The challenges that victims face in such situations are enormous. The fear of retaliation and isolation enforced by abusers can cripple their ability to seek help. Lesley's efforts to protect her children were thwarted, leaving her feeling trapped and helpless. As the weeks passed, the tension in the family increased. Lesley is determined to escape Lee's control, but he likely already knows about her plans. His possessiveness and need for control only escalated, and it became clear that he couldn't bear the idea of losing that grip on his family. In late August 2000, when the family's relationship was at its peak, Lesley and her 4 older children disappeared without a trace. Sarah Jane's boyfriend, Ree, may have been the last person to see her alive that fateful day. He then recounts their last normal moments together, unaware of the impending tragedy that will change everything. As the search for Lesley and her children begins, it becomes clear that their disappearance represents not only a new beginning for a family, but also a grim reflection on the dark reality of domestic abuse. The community will soon have to grapple with the horrifying truth behind the Ford family's secret life, which remains hidden beneath the surface of a normal life. On a day that would later haunt him forever, Peter remembered an uneasy moment when he took his infant son to visit Lesley Ford. At that moment, Lesley held the baby in her arms, but their warm interaction was suddenly interrupted when Lesley's stepfather suddenly drove up. In that tense moment, Lesley quickly handed the baby back to Peter, quickly said goodbye, and hastily rushed to the car. As her stepfather's car pulled out of the parking lot, Peter noticed the cold, contemptuous look he was giving her. That look made Peter clearly feel that he was not welcome. Feeling the overwhelming tension, Peter believes this is the moment Lesley Ford truly recognizes his presence in Lesley's life. Peter is also aware of something else, that Lesley is trying to control Lesley, and in Lesley's mind, anyone who doesn't comply with his wishes will be cut out of his life. This shows the nature of Lesley's power and dominance in his relationship with Lesley. A month later, having not received any contact from Lesley, Peter became worried and decided to report his sister and her children missing: Sarah Jane, Marie, Craig, and Stephen. It was a Friday when his anxiety reached its peak that he called the police to report their sudden and unusual absence. The police quickly became involved, prompted by Peter's concern. He explained that Lesley had not appeared since August, and what was more worrying was that her children had also not been to school during that term. Police need to determine whether this situation is truly unusual for Lesley. They considered the possibility that she might have taken the children somewhere else, but this was not the same as before. Lesley had left Lesley before, but this time, the important difference was that no one knew where she had gone. The next morning, the police continued to go to the Ford family's home to collect more information. Even though they have a hunch that something isn't right, they still haven't been able to put all the pieces of the picture together. When police spoke to Lesley Ford at the police station, he maintained the story he had told Peter that Lesley and the children had left him. However, the fact that Lesley had not been heard or seen for such a long period of time caused deep concern for investigators. As detectives dug deeper into the family's communications, they discovered a disturbing absence of activity. Lesley did not call, did not withdraw cash, and did not attempt to contact friends or family. These red flags raise further doubts about Lesley's safety and well-being. Given the circumstances, detectives began to consider the dangerous possibility that Lesley and her children had been harmed. They are acutely aware that statistics often indicate that if a woman goes missing or is found dead, the perpetrator is likely to be a partner or ex-partner. About 4 weeks after Lesley and the children disappeared, Lesley Ford must have felt the pressure of the investigation weighing on him. In an apparent attempt to distance himself from the situation, he drove his 2 youngest children to his family home in the Telford area. However, this move does not alleviate the scrutiny he faces. On Wednesday, he was arrested for benefit fraud, which landed him in police custody. Just hours after his arrest, Lesley confessed to the horrific murders of his wife, Lesley, and her 4 children. The grim news spread quickly throughout the small Cornish village of Kai, where the community was worried about the family's sudden disappearance. During interrogation, Lesley detailed in excruciating detail the events that occurred on that tragic day. He described a heated argument with Lesley that escalated violently. He claimed that he attacked her with a baseball bat and then forced her to take aspirin after causing serious injuries. He then recounted taking a piece of rope from the garage and using it to strangle Lesley. In a shocking display of brutality, he admitted to killing the children one by one, leaving investigators grappling with the utter horror of what he had done. Questions arise: do the children know they are in danger? Did they all go home at the same time? Did he lure them out of the room, or were they unaware of the impending threat? While Lesley was confessing his terrible act, the police obtained a search warrant for this family's home in Kai. The forensic team stepped in and conducted a thorough investigation. Peter received a phone call from the police, urging him to drive straight down to the area, filled with fear and uncertainty about what he might find. Meanwhile, news spread among his colleagues, who shared that a body had been discovered in a woodshed. It is clear that Lesley made a calculated decision about what to do with the bodies. He decided to bury them in the backyard, in the woodshed, wrapped in bedsheets. The remains of Lesley and her two sons were eventually discovered, but there was still no sign of her two daughters. Peter held on to a glimmer of hope, praying that somehow they had survived. The community's hearts sink even deeper as they grapple with the tragic reality of the family's fate, while Lee's chilling confession reveals the depth of his depravity and the extent of his control, him towards Lesley and her children. The Ford family's tragic story will leave an indelible mark on the community and serve as a haunting reminder of the horrors of domestic abuse. After confessing to brutally murdering his wife and stepchildren, Lesley Ford revealed the location where he buried the body. He led investigators to a potato field about 4 to 5 miles from their home, where he had buried the bodies of Sarah Jane and Marie. When the bodies were discovered, they had been buried for about 5 weeks. The summer heat accelerated the decomposition process, and Ford also used lime to make identification more difficult. The news of their deaths hit Peter hard. He couldn't remember exactly when he learned of their fate, but extreme grief consumed him. He felt like he couldn't breathe, wishing it was all a mistake, hoping that the reports were wrong. However, deep inside, he knew the truth, and the weight of that knowledge was hard to bear. Peter remembered the horrifying stories he had heard about murdered families, never imagining that this tragedy would happen to his family. The loss feels surreal, and even after 20 years, the pain is still raw. He often thought about what life would be like for Lesley and her children if they were still alive, imagining them as grandparents and the joy they would bring to the family. An autopsy performed by forensic pathologists clarified the nature of the murder. They discovered that the murders were carried out with astonishing precision. The systematic way Lee killed each family member raised questions about his mental state. Is Lee driven by rage, or is he calculated and methodical? Evidence shows that he was in control, carefully orchestrating each murder. None of the victims knew that the others had been killed before his death, suggesting that Lee was intentionally maintaining control and preventing them from panicking. The level of detail he went through ensuring that each child did not know about the previous murders revealed the disturbing logic behind his horrific actions. Peter, reflecting on the situation, struggled to reconcile his memories of Lee's abuse of Lesley with the unthinkable act of murder. He always believes that family should be a safe haven, a place of love and support. However, this betrayal shattered that trust. It is incomprehensible that Lee could commit such cruel acts against children. On May 24, 2001, Lesley Ford pleaded guilty to all 5 murders, receiving 5 life sentences. The judge imposed a minimum sentence of 27 years, allowing him the possibility of parole after that time. Peter and others were outraged, feeling that 27 years was too lenient for the tragic loss of 5 innocent lives. They grapple with the injustice of the situation, knowing that Lesley and the children will never have the chance to live their lives to the fullest. Peter expressed his anger at the thought that Lee might one day regain his freedom while his sister and her children were forever silent. Lee's guilty plea meant he was never forced to explain the motives behind his actions or the events leading up to the murder. Those details remain a closely guarded secret, known only to him. Peter speculates that Lee's choice to plead guilty was a way to avoid revealing the full extent of his inappropriate relationship with Sarah Jane, which was not only unethical but also illegal. Lee never provides clear information about his motives or the timeline of events, which only adds to Peter's sense of skepticism. He saw this withholding of information as Lee's final act of control, ensuring that the narrative surrounding the tragedy would be shaped solely by him, leaving Lesley and the children without a voice to share their experiences. Me. The 4 children's grave, marked by a simple black headstone, is a haunting reminder of their loss. They were all buried together, a poignant symbol of the innocence that was violently taken away. A memorial service held at Truro Cathedral saw small coffins placed solemnly before the altar, encapsulating the tragic loss of 4 vibrant young lives. Peter and others in the community feel great sadness as they reflect on what these children could have achieved if they were allowed to grow up. They mourn not only for the children but also for the dreams and futures that were stolen from them. During the funeral, Peter meets Colin, the father of the murdered children, who is clearly devastated. Colin expressed that everything meaningful in his life had been taken away from him, leaving him in a state of despair. Peter visited Cornwall a year later, retracing the steps of their shared tragedy. Together they planted flowers in the memorial garden at school, a small act of defiance against the darkness that had enveloped their lives. The local parish also established a memorial park in their honor, ensuring that their memories will be cherished and never forgotten. As time has passed, the community has worked to preserve the memories of Lesley, Sarah Jane Marie, Craig, and Stephen, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss.